So, Mavis, how about your spring break?
Yeah, it's great. You know what? It's interesting. I was talking to my niece in the spring break, and she asked me what a myth was. So I told her, it's a story, kind of a story. And then, just as I expect, another question come. What type of story? Oh, that was easy. So I told her, oh, it's an old story. And she asked me if it was a true story. Now, I could see difficulty coming. It might be true and it might not be true, right? So I say, fortunately, her cell phone beeped at her, and I escaped a further really. But it started me wondering. So we all think we know what myths are, but do we really know that?
I think so. They mainly fantasy stories, but based on a little bit of truth.
Yeah, I'm sure some are, such as stories about Achilles and the Trojan Wars from the ancient Greece. But what about other stories from ancient Greece, like those of Minotaur and Icarus flying?
Well, the stories about Achilles and the Trojan Wars were stories of heroes or great fighters.
Yeah.
And I should think there was a lot of truth in them, even though the personal tales may be exaggerated. Whereas the stories of the Minotaur and the Icarus, maybe they are made up stories and we put them as warnings or morals then.
Yeah, but when we examine the story of the history of these stories, we find some serious difficulties in deciding if they are truths, right? Partly truths were completely fantasy.
So what do you mean?
Well, let's take the stories from the Greek writer Homer, for example. He wrote his stories around 700 to 800 before Christ, but the stories of the Trojan Wars that he was writing about had happening around 1200 before Christ, and that is around 500 years before he wrote about it. So, if the stories were handed down by word of mouth over all those years, I think 500 years, I wouldn't be surprised if some aspect of the story had changed, right?
So what do you think could have changed in these stories?
I think the major change is the heroes got smarter, stronger, and faster, and the bad guys got uglier, stupid, and more evil. So we end up had a big evil Cyclops and a smart, strong Odysseus.
Could well be, but we must also remember that these stories are being told, right? Over and over again and again. And these stories reflect the culture in which they are told or they are made. And we may not understand that culture anymore. For example, if I say to you, well, let me tell you about my journey across town. It is understood that I will meet many traffic lights and stops once in a while, and it's normal during my journey. But we don't bother mentioning these traffic lights and stops because they are so obvious, right, in our life, that it would be a waste of time for me to mention them. But if Odysseus say the same thing, how are we to know what was not told or said because it was so obvious at that time then?
Yeah, I think I see your point. And in 500 years of oral traditions, who knows what has not been said or not been told and what has been added, right?
Right, so we may never know how much truth there is, right, in a myth or in mythology. Yeah, these stories are so good that they get fixed in the imagination of so many people that over time these stories get made and remade in other cultures as well. And in fact, these stories get retold today as well in our modern culture. So for example, there are even some contemporary fantasy or adventure novels or stories about these Greek gods or heroes. And actually I get the author's name. His name is Rick Riordan. And have you ever heard of the Percy Jackson series?
Yeah, I heard that series before, and I know there is a series movie based on the novels, right? So maybe that sounds like my holiday reading.
Sounds like a good idea. So, based on the conversation, Mavis and I have two questions to ask you. The first question, we mentioned two heroes or great fighters in our conversation. Can you name these two heroes?
Yeah, the second question is, we mentioned a story or a myth written in about the Trojan War. So who is the author's name?